It was 11:42 p.m. on a Thursday when Leonard Kessler, 54 years old, sat at the kitchen counter of his Des Moines condo, his phone in his hand, staring at the screen in disbelief. His wife, Dana, was supposed to be on day 4 of a girl's trip to Palm Springs, but instead of the usual updates or messages, he had received a text, a simple statement that shattered everything. The message came with a screenshot, a bank transfer, $118,000, moved from their joint savings to her personal account. 2 sentences. That's all it took to bring 15 years of marriage to a screeching halt. Leonard set his phone down, his hands steady despite the storm in his chest. He finished his coffee, the bitter taste of betrayal mingling with the dark roast. For months the signs had been there. Weekend getaways that stretched longer. New clothes Dana never wore around him. Phone calls that ended when he entered the room. But Leonard, a forensic accountant by profession, had always been good at ignoring the little discrepancies. After all, noticing things like this was his job, and maybe that was his mistake, not confronting them sooner. Or maybe his first mistake was marrying someone who thought his career was just spreadsheets and boring numbers. He opened his laptop, his fingers working almost on instinct. One of his email accounts, one Dana didn't know existed, pinged with new notifications. 3. Alerts from his bank security system. Someone had attempted to change passwords on accounts Dana had never seen. She was thorough, he had to give her that. Leonard typed 2 words into his phone and hit send, good luck. Then he called his brother, Jason. "Remember that contingency plan we discussed 5 years ago?" Leonard asked, his voice calm, almost detached. "It's time," Jason replied, the question in his voice more a formality than a doubt. "Yes," Leonard confirmed. She just made her move. He hung up the phone and glanced at the wedding photo on the wall. It was the only picture, left in the condo with both of them in it. He should have noticed that too. Leonard met Dana at an alumni event for the University of Iowa when he was 38, recently divorced, and fully immersed in building his forensic accounting practice. Dana, at 34, was vibrant, ambitious, and completely uninterested in what Leonard did for a living. "I don't need to understand the details," she'd say, whenever he tried to explain a case. "As long as you make enough for us to live well." They married a year later, and Leonard helped her open a yoga studio, funding the entire venture with his savings. When she wanted a bigger house, luxury cars, or extravagant vacations, he nodded and signed the checks. Always. It wasn't until, years later, when he was fixing his father's deck, that the warning came. Leonard's father, hammer in hand, paused, noticing the way Dana spent his son's money. "Son," he'd said carefully, "make sure she values what you do to earn it." Leonard brushed it off, but the comment lingered. 6 years into their marriage, Leonard began quietly restructuring his assets. Nothing illegal, just protective. He set up trusts, created LLCs, invested in cryptocurrency, and kept offshore accounts for international clients. Dana only knew about their joint checking and savings, nothing else. As Dana's social media following grew, and her trips with her wellness community turned into longer stays, Leonard's suspicions deepened. She'd start with small excuses. "You wouldn't enjoy it, it's just yoga talk and juice cleanses." But Leonard saw through it. Then came the birthday she forgot. She bought him a watch the next day, apologizing with excuses about the studio expansion. That night, Leonard finalized the paperwork on his contingency plan. He hadn't been wrong about the signs, he just hadn't wanted to face them. The next morning, Leonard woke before the sun, as was his habit. He brewed a pot of coffee, his movements deliberate, as if the calm routine could somehow steady the tornado in his chest. He hadn't slept. There was no need for sleep. Not now. At the kitchen counter, the laptop was open again, the numbers already moving in his head. He accessed his encrypted files, running through layers of digital security that Dana would never have known existed. He'd always kept his financial affairs separate, but now it felt like the only thing he had left in this marriage that mattered. Leonard had learned long ago that emotion, in his world, was a luxury he couldn't afford. In his line of work, every action had to be calculated, measured and precise. He couldn't let the raw, searing sting of betrayal cloud his judgment. As much as he wanted to scream, to demand answers, he knew the truth. Dana had already made her choice. She'd already crossed a line, and now it was time for him to reclaim control. He had 1 hour before he needed to meet a client in town. In that time, he would prepare his first strike. The transfer of $118,000 wasn't just money, it was leverage. Leonard knew better than anyone that money could hide a multitude of sins, and Dana had been reckless. Over the next few hours, he would secure every last piece of evidence needed to ensure that she couldn't wiggle her way out of this. It wasn't about revenge. Not yet. It was about making sure she couldn't take what was his without paying for it. The first move was simple. Leonard called his lawyer, Martin Holt, a man who knew how to navigate a complex divorce. They'd worked together on smaller cases, but now it was personal. Holt was shocked at the details Leonard provided, but not surprised. "Get your ducks in a row," Martin said, his voice low, professional. "I'll get the paperwork ready. You want to go through the usual channels?" Leonard hesitated. The usual channels meant dragging this out in court, playing a public game of dirty laundry for all to see. It would be expensive, painful, and above all it would give Dana an opportunity to rewrite the narrative. "No," Leonard said, his tone firm. "I need this to be quiet. I want leverage. I want control." Martin paused, then spoke with understanding. "You're playing a quiet game then, huh? You got it. We'll handle this discreetly, but I'll need everything you've got. Don't hold back." Leonard hung up, taking a long sip of his coffee. This was his only chance. Dana couldn't be allowed to walk away unscathed. Not after everything. He turned to his phone, scrolling through his contacts until he found the number he was looking for. Tony, his old friend from the world of private investigations. Tony wasn't an ordinary PI. He was a fixer, a man who could gather anything Leonard needed without leaving a trace. And Leonard needed everything, from Dana's hidden accounts to any evidence that could be used to expose her betrayal. The call went straight to voicemail. Leonard wasn't surprised. Tony worked in the shadows, and reaching him was never simple. He left a short, cryptic message. "Need you to move quickly. I'll explain when I see you. Same spot as last time." After the call, Leonard stood in front of the mirror, adjusting his tie, his expression hardening. He was no longer the man who had spent years trying to please Dana. He was a man who had been pushed to the edge and had only one option left: fight back. It wasn't just the money Dana had taken that hurt. It was the lies, the deceit, the fact that she had never trusted him enough to be honest. She had made her choices, and now Leonard would make his. The drive into town was quick. Leonard's mind was sharp, but his body felt like it was moving in slow motion. His thoughts were clouded by images of Dana, smiling on social media, posing in front of luxury cars and expensive dinners. She had always craved a lifestyle that came with the promise of success, but she had been blind to the costs, the emotional cost of betrayal. By the time Leonard arrived at his office, his heart was steady. The plan was in motion, and there was no turning back. Leonard sat in his office, the familiar hum of the fluorescent lights above him almost soothing, as though it could distract him from the tension pulsing just beneath the surface. The coffee from earlier had worn off, and he hadn't bothered with lunch. Food seemed unimportant now. The only thing that mattered was the hunt. He had everything set in motion. His lawyer was on board, Tony was already making his discreet inquiries, and Leonard had begun pulling together the financial files. He'd begun documenting the transfers, the withdrawals, the questionable purchases Dana had made over the past several months. Each transaction was a thread, and Leonard was weaving them together, slowly but with purpose. But there was one piece missing. Dana was still in the dark, unaware that her every move was being scrutinized. Leonard knew her well, too well. She wouldn't make a move without some sort of backup plan. She'd always been cautious, always calculated, but she'd underestimated him, and that was her mistake. The phone buzzed on the desk, pulling Leonard from his thoughts. It was a text. Message from Tony, got something. Third account, opened under her mother's name, big deposits. Leonard's fingers hovered over the keys. He didn't need to ask for details. He knew what Tony meant, another hidden account, this one tied to Dana's family. It was where the real money was going, where the secrets were buried. His heart rate quickened. This was the smoking gun. Dana had thought she could keep this from him, but now Leonard had her cornered. He responded to Tony's message with a simple confirmation. "Get me the details." He stared at the phone for a moment, his pulse steady before slipping the device back into his pocket. Dana's lies were unraveling faster than he'd anticipated. The trail of deceit was growing, and every new piece of information felt like a small victory. But there was no time to relish it. With his mind focused, Leonard pulled up his laptop again, logging into his secure cloud storage. The financial reports were updated in real time, and he could track every movement in Dana's accounts as it happened. Every time she made a withdrawal or moved money, it showed up immediately. He had eyes on everything, and it gave him a sense of power he hadn't felt in months. But the control wasn't enough. Leonard wanted justice. He wanted to make sure that when the dust settled, Dana couldn't simply walk away and pretend. It had all been a misunderstanding. He couldn't let her have her cake and eat it too. A thought crossed his mind. How long would she keep up the act? How long would she pretend that nothing was wrong, that her affair with Trey didn't exist, that the money she'd siphoned from their accounts was just savings for a rainy day? Leonard knew her well enough to know that she would never admit fault. She would lie, manipulate, and twist the truth until the end. And that was exactly why Leonard had to be meticulous. He wasn't just after the money, he was after her ability to lie without consequence. He wanted to expose the truth, strip her of her power, and make sure everyone saw her for what she truly was. Later that afternoon, Leonard met Tony in a quiet, dimly lit cafe on the outskirts of town. Tony had arrived early, as usual, his dark sunglasses hiding most of his face. They didn't greet each other with anything more than a curt nod. In their world, there was no need for pleasantries. Business came first. Tony slid a manila folder across the table, and Leonard immediately opened it. Inside were the details he had been waiting for: proof of Dana's hidden account, transfers to an unknown address, and even more significant, withdrawals. Leonard's eyes scanned the documents, his mind working through each piece like an accountant at a crime scene. "She's been pulling out more than you thought, hasn't she?" Tony remarked quietly, watching Leonard's reaction. Leonard didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached for his phone and opened the secure file that contained Dana's financial data. He began cross-referencing, pulling up records from the last year. Tony was right. The scale of the theft was bigger than Leonard had imagined. It wasn't just money. It was everything Dana had been hiding. He exhaled slowly, leaning back in his chair. "How long have you been working on this?" Tony shrugged, his fingers tapping lightly on the table. "Couple weeks. Your wife's been keeping her tracks covered, but we found a way in. It's not all sunshine for her." Leonard's eyes narrowed. "How much longer until we have everything?" "Depends on her moves. If she keeps drawing money from that account, we'll have a clear trail. I'll get you the rest soon." Leonard nodded, his fingers absently tapping on the folder. The tension was building, but it wasn't over yet. They were just getting started. As Leonard left the cafe, he felt a flicker of something, a shift in the air almost like a quiet storm. Everything he had worked for, all the careful planning was coming together. But Dana wasn't just going to roll over. She'd fight, he knew that. She'd deny everything, twist the narrative, but Leonard had no intention of letting her win, and he wasn't about to give her the luxury of time. Leonard's mind was a whirlwind as he reviewed the latest information. The hidden accounts, the sudden transfers, the meticulous withdrawals. All of it pointed to a careful, deliberate plan. But what did it all mean? Why was Dana keeping these secrets, and where had it all gone? Was it just about the money, or was there something more? The call from his lawyer, Mark, came just as Leonard was walking into his apartment after a long day of combing through documents. The familiar voice was a welcome distraction, a reminder that he wasn't working alone. "In this, Leonard, we need to talk." Mark's voice was sharp. "I've been reviewing the latest reports, and there's a serious issue. Dana's financial moves, they're more than just questionable, they're criminal." Leonard's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" "I mean, we need to prepare for a full-scale legal battle. She's not just taking money from your accounts, she's laundering it, hiding it through shell companies and funneling it out of the country. You've got a paper trail leading right to a tax haven, and it's all tied to her business dealings. With Trey Harmon, Leonard's blood ran cold. He leaned against the doorframe, gripping his phone tightly. Trey Harmon, the fitness influencer? Exactly, Mark confirmed. And here's the kicker, there's a real estate transaction that ties him to her. It looks like they've been using the money for some kind of investment scheme. You're being set up as an unwitting accomplice in all this, which is why we need to act fast. Leonard's mind raced. He knew Dana was ambitious, but this was beyond anything he could have imagined. She'd been playing a much deeper game than he realized. The affair with Trey was just the surface. This was something entirely different. "Do you have everything we need?" Leonard asked, his voice steady despite the chaos inside. "I'm getting it all together," Mark said. "We'll need to get this to the authorities, but first you need to prepare yourself for what comes next. Dinah's not going to give up without a fight. She'll use every trick in the book to protect herself." Leonard exhaled sharply. He'd known that, of course. He'd been preparing for this moment for months. But now that the full scope of the betrayal was coming to light, he couldn't help but feel a sick sense of realization settling in. His wife, his partner, had been living a double life, and it wasn't just about money. It was about power, control, and manipulation. "I'll take care of it," Leonard said, his voice colder than it had been in years. "You keep me updated. We'll handle this the right way." After the call ended, Leonard stood in the hallway. For a long moment, the weight of the revelation pressing down on him. The storm had finally broken, and the pieces were all falling into place. The next few days passed in a blur. Leonard dove deeper into the files, poring over every transaction, every line of code in the financial records. Tony had given him more information, more names, more evidence of the web Dana had spun. Leonard could hardly believe the extent of it. But as shocking as it was, he couldn't stop now. Not when the endgame was so close. He was meticulous, analyzing each aspect of the plan, making sure everything was in order before he made his move. This was bigger than just protecting his assets. It was about reclaiming his life, his dignity, and his future. And Leonard wasn't about to let Dana take that from him. But as he sat in his office late one night, reviewing yet another set of documents, a text message popped up on his phone. It was from an unknown number. "We need to talk. Meet me tomorrow. I have something you'll want to hear." Leonard stared at the screen for a moment, his heart skipping a beat. Who could this be? A part of him wanted to dismiss it as nothing, more than a prank or a scam. But there was a gut feeling gnawing at him. Someone had information. Someone knew something he didn't. Without hesitation, he replied, "Where?" The response came almost immediately. "The old bar on 5th and I." Main 2 p.m. Leonard didn't waste any time. He knew exactly where it was. The place where he and Dana used to go in the early days of their relationship. A place that held memories, some good, most now tainted by the betrayal that had crept into every corner of his life. The following afternoon, Leonard stood outside the dimly lit bar, the midday sun casting long shadows across the cracked sidewalk. He took a deep breath and stepped inside. The familiar scent of stale beer and old wood filled the air, but it was the man sitting at the corner booth who caught his attention. It was Trey Harmon. The fitness influencer looked out of place in the dingy bar. His usually pristine appearance was now slightly disheveled, his clothes rumpled as if he'd been on the run. The sight of him stirred something deep inside Leonard. Anger, betrayal, and a twisted sense of satisfaction. This was the man who had not only stolen Leonard's wife, but had also played a part in her scheme to take him down. Trey didn't look up when Leonard approached. He didn't need to. Leonard knew exactly what this was about. Without a word, Leonard sat down across from him. Trey finally looked up, his eyes narrowing slightly. "You're wondering why I called you here," Trey said, his voice low and guarded. "I'm not wondering. I'm waiting," Leonard replied, his tone ice-cold. Trey smirked, leaning back in, his seat. "You know, I could have just taken your money and run, but I didn't. I'm here because there's more to this than you think. Dana isn't the only one with a plan." Leonard's breath caught in his throat. "What are you talking about?" Trey leaned forward, his voice barely above a whisper. "You're not the only one who's been playing the game. There's more at stake here than just your marriage. If you want the whole story, you're going to have to trust me, and believe me, I don't offer that to just anyone." Leonard's pulse quickened as he stared at Trey, unsure whether to believe a word he was saying. Every instinct in his body screamed to walk away, to get up from this table and leave the mess behind. But something inside him, the same gut feeling that had kept him going through all of this, told him that Trey knew more than he was letting on, more than even Leonard himself had uncovered. "What exactly are you saying?" Leonard asked, his voice low and sharp. Trey took a slow breath, leaning in closer. "You think this is just about you and Dana, don't you? You're wrong. This is about something bigger, much bigger than both of you. And if you want to come out on top, you'll need to understand the full picture. I can help you with that, but only if you're willing to listen." Leonard leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "I'm listening, go on." Trey's eyes flickered, his face taking on a more serious, almost grim expression. "You've been focused on the money, right? You've been tracking the funds, the transfers, all the hidden accounts. But there's something you're missing, Leonard. Something critical. The money isn't the only thing Dana's been after." Leonard's mind raced. He'd assumed it was all about the money. What else could it be? But as Trey's words sank in, a chill ran down his spine. "What are you talking about?" Leonard pressed, his voice growing tense. "Dana's been working with someone." "Elton," Trey said, his voice barely a whisper. "Someone who's pulling the strings, and that someone is closer to you than you think. You won't like it, but it's the truth." A cold knot twisted in Leonard's stomach. "Who?" Trey hesitated for a moment, then leaned in even closer, his breath coming out in short bursts. "Your best friend, Tony." The name hit Leonard like a punch to the gut. Tony, his confidant, his ally in this fight, the man who had been helping him uncover Dana's financial deceit. He had trusted Tony with everything, every lead, every piece of evidence. And now Trey was telling him that Tony had been involved in this from the beginning. Leonard shook his head in disbelief. No, that can't be true. Tony's been with me through all of this. He's helped me every step of the way." Trey shrugged, his expression hard. "I'm not saying he's been in it for the whole ride, but I'm telling you, Leonard, he's been in on it. He's the one who's been feeding Dana the information about your moves, your strategies. He's been playing both sides." The words stung like venom, but Leonard couldn't ignore the truth in them. Something about the way Trey spoke, like he knew things he shouldn't, made Leonard's blood run cold. Could it really be Tony? Could his closest friend have been betraying him all along? Trey watched Leonard's reaction, a faint glimmer of something in his eyes. Satisfaction, perhaps, or maybe pity. He leaned back in his seat, giving Leonard a moment to process the revelation. "I know this isn't easy to hear," Trey continued, "but I'm not here to tear you down. I'm offering you a way out, Leonard, a chance to take back control." Leonard didn't know what to say. His mind was racing, thoughts swirling in a vicious spiral. Could he trust Trey? Could he really believe the man who had taken his wife, betrayed him in the most personal way? And yet in that moment Leonard realized he didn't have many choices left. He needed to know everything, even if it meant going down a darker path than he had ever imagined. "I'm listening," Leonard said, his voice hoarse. Trey's eyes gleamed as he leaned in one last time. "Dana has a plan to move out of the country with Trey. She's got all the assets, all the money, and she's going to disappear. But she's not doing this alone. Tony's been working with her, making sure everything goes according to plan. The real estate deals, the offshore accounts. He's the one who's been setting it all up. And when they leave, they're going to leave you with nothing. No assets, no leverage." Leonard's heart raced. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about his entire future. Everything he'd worked for, everything he'd built, was on the line. And it wasn't just Dana he had to worry about. Tony, his so-called friend, had been playing him like a puppet, feeding him false hope and steering him away from the real game. Trey saw the resolve building in Leonard's eyes, and for the first time, there was no mockery in his expression. "But here's the thing, Leonard. You've got the upper hand. You've been putting together the puzzle for months, and you've got the pieces you need to expose this whole thing. Dana doesn't know you've figured it out yet. Tony doesn't know either. They're both waiting for you to make a mistake, but you won't. You've got a chance to take back what's yours. You just need to be smart." Leonard stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. His mind was made up. He couldn't let this betrayal slide. Not after everything. Not when it was all coming to a head. "Thanks for the tip," Leonard said coldly, turning toward the exit. "But now I've got my own plan." As Leonard steps out of the bar, his mind is already working, preparing for the battle ahead. Trey's revelation has thrown him into a whirlwind of betrayal, and now the stakes are higher than ever. His next move will be crucial, and he knows that it's time to turn the tables, not just on Dana, but on Tony too. With his plan in motion, Leonard prepares to reclaim what's been taken from him, but he's not sure who he can trust anymore. Leonard sat at his desk, the glow of his computer screen reflecting in his tired eyes. It was late, but his mind refused to rest. He had spent the last few days going over every detail of the plan, every piece of evidence, every conversation he had with Tony, with Dana. Now the time had come to make his move. The stakes were higher than ever, and Leonard knew that one wrong step could ruin everything. His fingers hovered over the keyboard as he reviewed the files he had compiled on Dana's finances. Hidden accounts, shell companies, wire transfers, all of it was at his fingertips, ready to expose the web of lies she had spun. But what really struck him was the pattern. It wasn't just the money. It was the careful orchestration of her actions, the way everything had been set in motion long before Leonard had caught on. She had planned this escape for months, maybe years, but now it was his turn. He clicked open the folder containing the final piece of his strategy, the incriminating evidence against Tony, the bank statements, the email exchanges, the phone records. It was all there, proof that Tony had been feeding Dana information, helping her cover her tracks. He had betrayed Leonard, and now Leonard would make sure that betrayal wouldn't go unpunished. Leonard leaned back in his chair, allowing the weight of everything to settle in. His entire life had been a series of careful steps, each one leading him to this moment. He had worked hard for his success, built his career from the ground up. And now, this betrayal was the final test. He had one shot, one chance to turn the tables to regain control of the narrative. He had spent too much time fighting for what was his, and he wasn't about to let Dana or Tony take it all away. The phone on his desk buzzed, breaking his train of thought. He glanced at the caller ID, Tony. Leonard felt a surge of anger, but he forced himself to remain calm. This was exactly what he needed. Tony had no idea that Leonard knew the truth. He was about to walk straight into the trap. With a deep breath, Leonard picked up the phone. "Hello?" "Hey man, how's it going?" Tony's voice came through, casual as ever, as if nothing had changed, as if Leonard didn't know everything. "It's going," Leonard replied, his voice cool. "Listen, I need you to do something for me." Tony's tone shifted, a hint of hesitation creeping in. "What's up?" "I've been thinking," Leonard continued, choosing his words carefully. "There's a few things I need to take care of with the accounts. I need you to meet me tomorrow at the office. I've got some stuff I want to go over." There was a long pause on the other end. Leonard could almost hear the wheels turning in Tony's head. It was obvious that Tony was trying to figure out what Leonard knew, but Leonard wasn't going. "To make it easy for him, sure," Tony finally said, his voice strained. "I'll be there." "Good," Leonard said, his tone cold and deliberate. "Don't be late." He hung up the phone without waiting for a response, feeling the weight of the moment settle in. Tony would show up tomorrow, just like Trey had said he would. He would walk right into Leonard's trap. And when he did, Leonard would have everything he needed to destroy him. But that wasn't the only part of the plan. Leonard had one more step to take before everything would be set in motion. He needed to make sure that Dana didn't have a chance to escape before he exposed everything. He needed to ensure that she couldn't flee the country with the money she had stolen. He grabbed his phone and dialed a number, waiting as the line rang. "Hello?" A woman's voice answered on the other end. "This is Leonard Kessler," he said, his voice sharp. "I need you to block a flight. A first-class seat from Newark to Paris booked under the name Dana Kessler. It's scheduled for next Friday." There was a pause. "Let me check that for you." Leonard could hear the clicking of keys as the EE. A woman searched the records. He waited, the tension building in his chest. This was it, the final hurdle. "I've located the flight," the woman said, her voice low. "I can block the booking for you, but you'll need to confirm your identity. We'll need some documentation." Leonard gritted his teeth. Of course, they needed more than just a request, but he was ready. He had anticipated this. He had already secured the necessary documents to confirm his authority, his access to their joint assets. He quickly provided the information, and within minutes, the woman confirmed that Dana's flight had been blocked. "Thank you," Leonard said, hanging up the phone. A feeling of satisfaction washed over him. Dana wouldn't be able to run, at least not yet. He had just gained a crucial advantage. With everything in place, Leonard took a moment to reflect. The storm was coming. Tomorrow, he would face Tony, and the day after that, Dana. He was about to expose the web of lies that had ensnared him, the lies that had torn his life apart. But Leonard wasn't afraid anymore. He had the truth. And in the end, that was all that mattered. The sun had barely risen when Leonard walked into the office the next morning, his briefcase in hand. He had always prided himself on his punctuality, but today it felt like more than a habit. It was part of the plan, his methodical approach to the chaos that had unfolded in his life. He passed through the empty corridors of his office building, the silence almost suffocating. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a cold, sterile glow on the walls. Leonard's footsteps echoed, the only sound breaking the stillness. He reached the conference room, set his briefcase down, and took a seat, folding his hands. In front of him, Tony would be arriving soon. Leonard could feel the anticipation building within him, but he kept his expression neutral. He had prepared for this moment for weeks, and he wasn't about to let the weight of the situation unravel him now. A few minutes later, the door opened. Tony walked in, looking casual as ever, wearing that same smug expression that had always grated on Leonard's nerves. "Morning, boss," Tony said with a grin. "What's this all about?" Leonard didn't answer immediately. He studied Tony's face, noting the flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. He could tell Tony was nervous, but he wasn't about to give him the satisfaction of acknowledging it. "Sit down," Leonard said, his voice calm but firm. Tony hesitated for a moment, but eventually took a seat across from Leonard, still acting, as though nothing was wrong. Leonard opened the briefcase slowly, deliberately, and pulled out a stack of papers. He placed them in front of Tony, his fingers lingering on the top sheet for a moment. "Before we get into it," Leonard said, his tone even, "I want you to look at these." Tony glanced at the papers, his face shifting from confidence to confusion. He picked them up, his fingers trembling as he scanned the contents. Leonard watched as Tony's expression morphed from confusion to realization. He understood exactly what was happening now. "But what is this?" Tony stammered, trying to mask the panic in his voice. "These are the records," Leonard said, leaning forward. "The wire transfers, the emails, the accounts you helped Dana hide from me. I've got everything, Tony, all the proof I need to destroy you." Tony's face drained of color, and for the first time, Leonard saw the fear that had always been lurking beneath Tony's bravado. I didn't mean for this to happen," Tony blurted, his voice cracking. "I was just trying to help her out. She said she'd take care of me, you know? I didn't think it would go this far." Leonard leaned back in his chair, his eyes cold. "You didn't think. You didn't care. You helped her steal from me, Tony. You betrayed me, betrayed our friendship." Tony opened his mouth to protest, but Leonard held up a hand to silence him. "You're not getting away with this, not after everything I've worked for," Leonard continued, his voice gaining strength. "I'm going to make sure this gets exposed, and I'm going to make sure you never see a penny of that stolen money." Tony swallowed hard, his hands shaking. He knew Leonard wasn't bluffing. I can fix this," Tony said desperately. "We can work something out, right? You don't have to go public with this. We can—" "Don't bother," Leonard interrupted, his voice cold and final. "It's too late for that. You crossed the line, and now you're going to face the consequences." Tony opened his mouth to say something else, but Leonard wasn't interested in hearing it. He stood up, gathering the papers from the table. "Leave," Leonard said, his tone sharp. "Don't come back here, ever." Tony's eyes flickered with panic, but he knew there was no point in arguing further. He stood up shakily, the weight of his guilt settling heavily on his shoulders. With a final defeated look at Leonard, he turned and walked out of the room, his footsteps echoing in the empty hall. Leonard watched him leave, his heart pounding. The first part of the plan was done. Tony was out of the picture and the evidence was secure. Now it was time for Dana to face the consequences. He picked up his phone, dialed the number of his lawyer, and spoke quickly. "I want to file for divorce effective immediately. And I want everything, every cent, every asset. I've got the proof I need to make sure Dana doesn't get away with anything." As Leonard hung up the phone, he felt a sense of relief wash over him. But it was fleeting. There was still work to be done. The legal battle would be long and exhausting, but Leonard was prepared. He had already lost too much: his trust, his marriage, his peace of mind. But now he was taking it all back. As the story ends, Leonard has reclaimed control over his life, confronting the betrayals head-on. The emotional and legal battle is far from over, but Leonard's resolve has never been stronger. He's not just fighting for justice, he's fighting for his future, and he's ready to win.